Hey everyone, I'm Rather Incoherent. Continuing with our trend of the last two videos, we're going to be talking about my 5 favorite skills today. And this is a much easier video to make because there are only 100 skills. There are like over 400 events. I forget how many assets there were. I only had like 20 cards on my list originally, and then I cut out all the ones like Deduction and Vicious Blow and Promise of Power, where they are just strong, and that's why I like them. And like there are maybe 10 skills in the game that are both interesting and valuable. So this was a pretty easy list for me to assemble. Let's start with my number 5, Savant. Promise of Power is just Savant, but better. Like, I'm not gonna pretend that Savant is better than Promise of Power. Promise of Power has no downside, the curse barely matters. It costs 0 XP instead, it gives 4 question marks to anyone, anytime, all the time. It's just better than Savant. Savant's promise is that when you test your worst skill, you get Promise of Power. And that's just a sad place to live, but it's an infinitely more interesting card. Like, Promise of Power is just busted, right? Savant is a really interesting way for a card to work, and the little hidden synergies with Universal Stat Boost where you're running like the Black Fan and Geass alongside Savant. So your lowest stat was originally a 1 in head and your second lowest was a 3. And when you get that +2 to your whole stat line, that becomes a 3 and a 5, and Savant is sort of double dipping your stat boost there by pulling a 5 over instead of a 3. At base, Savant would have given you 5 because of its own question mark, but then it gives you 9 because it's double dipping the stat boost you're getting, making you basically like unable to fail a Mythos test to anything but auto fail. That little hidden synergy with Savant is one of my favorite things about it, but it's just a really good card in green. It's one of the few cards that actually lets green not be afraid of the Mythos test. Up there with You Handle this one. It's really nice, it's a staple for the class, and I'm really glad it got printed. And going on over to number 4, we have more green staples and Quick Thinking. Quick Thinking is just an incredible card. Quick Thinking is one of the more interesting cards in the game when you realize what its question mark is actually doing. If you would have originally failed by 2 or more, Quick Thinking does nothing. That's fine. That you lost a lot, you lose. But if you would fail by 1, Quick Thinking is going to make you pass. If you were going to pass by 0, Quick Thinking does nothing. But if you pass by 1 or more, the question mark from Quick Thinking just gives you another action. There are only 2 amounts where Quick Thinking isn't relevant, and that's pass by 0 or fail by a lot. And I guess fail by a lot is many different amounts, but usually if you're committing Quick Thinking, it's not going to be that many different numbers that fail by a lot. So Quick Thinking is almost always going to give you a lot of value, whether it's the reason you pass the test or it gives you an additional action. And there's a lot of weird little things you can do with Quick Thinking, where you use a lightning bolt window and you commit Quick Thinking to it to take turns when you shouldn't be able to. The best, most easily usable example of this is gambling with skids during the Luke Robinson timing window. I'm talking about parallel skids here, not normal skids. But you use parallel skids' ability to gamble right after enemies engage with you, but before they attack. That's a timing window that Luke Robinson uses all the time to peace out with Gatebox, but skids can gamble with Quick Thinking, pass by 2, and then just trip the guy who tried to beat him up. It's a really cool thing you can do with Quick Thinking, and it's not like the only situation where you get to use Quick Thinking like that. There's a lot of really cool ways that Quick Thinking lets you interact with the game in ways that aren't necessarily intended, and I love the card for that. Moving on to number 3, it's the reason that we think of survivors as being the recursion class. It's resourceful. This card lets you do things that maybe you shouldn't be able to do sometimes. It is the staple card that makes recursion such a universal effect. If you were to remove any other recursive card in Survivor, it wouldn't be the biggest deal, but if you were to cut resourceful, it would be just a knife to the heart of the class. More than any other skill in the game, resourceful is its class's identity, and I love it for that. Of course, its effect is powerful, it's very easy to commit this to something, very easy to get it to go off, and I just really, really like what it does for class identity. Now, speaking of class identity, let's talk about True Understanding. True Understanding is so funny to me, because the class identity of Seeker is being so strong that Discover a Clue as a fast card, which is essentially what True Understanding does, doesn't get run. Because essentially, if you have any Mythos test that you are already going to pass, right? You get a Frozen in Fear, and somebody throws you a Promise of Power to make sure you break it because you're the cluer and you matter. You can just throw True Understanding at it and get a clue when you pass. You can do a scenario test that you're already going to pass. You can commit your own cards to make you pass a Mythos test. You almost always will eventually find a spot where True Understanding becomes fast, get a clue. It's so good. But it just doesn't go in Seeker decks. Why? It's not practice. That's really the reason. That's pretty much it. There are so many strong cards that True Understanding never gets run. it was like the 46th card in my Mandy deck. And that's like the only place I really run it other than low-level Herbie decks, because it's a card you can vomit out super fast in him. But the card is absolutely incredible. And just like the identity of Survivor is recursive stuff, the identity of Seeker is being so broken that stuff like True Understanding, where other classes would be foaming at the mouth to run this, Seekers was like, yeah, whatever, we got better things to do. True Understanding should not be a card that got left by the wayside, but it is. It's a lot like Garrote Wire. Cigarette Case just takes the same slot, does something more universally valuable. You should have other ways of killing. You don't need the Garrote Wire. So it gets pushed out of play even though it's a sick card, and that's exactly where True Understanding lives too. And then coming over to my favorite skill in the game, it's another new card. It is Ghastly Possession. I love this card. First, it has this Doom thing that I actually don't think is that good, where it's basically promise of power on an asset that you want to have Doom on it. And sure, that's neat, that's cool, I really like that. I think if more cards or synergies were printed like this, where they actually do something good for the synergy and then have a secondary effect that's just universally good, every single archetype would just be a better performing archetype. Doom needs to see more cards like this and less cards like whatever the Trip asset that just came out was, because man, is that card not going to make your deck better. But the reason this is my favorite card is actually this secondary effect. It does get some brownie points for helping the Doom archetype, but the ability to use this as a question mark on any of your Mystic assets and then get half their charges back rounded down is really nice. It is decidedly worse as a Kluber, because clue finding cards all have odd numbers. Divination level 4 has 9 charges. Rite of Seeking and Clairvoyance only get 3 charges. For fight assets, this is definitely a lot better, because you'll be getting 2 back on your Shrivelink and your Azure Flames. Branding of Thugga has the same problem as Divination, but Divination was also the best clue-finding asset to use this on. But essentially, this is just a skill card that gives you more charges on the stuff your character revolves around doing, that also happens to have some synergies with the Doom archetype, and I really, really like this card. I haven't gotten to play with it yet, but eventually I'm definitely going to play it when I get around to Norman, and I might find a slot in a deck somewhere else for it before then. Ghastly Possession is, to me, what you really should be expecting out of Mystic cards, and I'm happy that it exists. Anyways, 7 Rather Incoherent, hope you enjoyed this video. Before I wrap up, I do want to say it's kind of weird there just aren't that many skills in Arkham Horror. I always forget this. Every couple of months I find out again, I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. But there's only like 100 skills in Arkham. There are like 800 combined assets and events or something. But there's like 100 skills. There just aren't that many of them, and it's kind of weird. Anyways, I've been Rather Incoherent. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, like, comment, subscribe, all that stuff really does help the channel grow. And I'll see you in the next one.